everyone, welcome to another Random Talk Sunday. Today I thought it would be interesting to dive into the Super Bowl and discuss sort of its impact, at least among Americans, and in particular the culture that we sort of have as a result from this particular event. And in case for people who do not know, the Super Bowl involves the two best American football player teams competing for the ultimate title of champion. And this year is actually the 50th, so it's a very big year for football. And its origins obviously began in 1966. If you look at, since this is the 50th Super Bowl, we have a Super Bowl each year, the origins began roughly within that period, but the whole concept of having a bowl, in particular a game that involves two of the best football player teams, started actually a lot earlier than the Super Bowl actually. It was originally sort of called a bowl game to begin with, and it was primarily focused on sort of post season college football, which I think began, at least from my research, in 1902. So football has been around for quite a significant amount of time, and a lot of it did stem from these colleges really kind of bringing forth these various forms of sports, and one of those sports was football, and it sort of became fairly popular among Americans, and it's really the only sport that we really play. I mean, other countries I think do have their own little leagues, but they are in nowhere I think the same camp as football, and a lot of it really did start through, in particular, universities really trying to put forward these various sort of more recreational activities, and in doing so kind of creating a sort of industry behind it. And it sort of really ultimately did succeed, and now we have sort of the NFL. But the way in which finally the Super Bowl was able to sort of happen is we had these two leagues, the NFL and the AFL, and they ended up sort of merging, and as a result of the merger, we sort of got this idea of, hey, why don't we have two of each league compete for sort of the ultimate title, and then hence we got the Super Bowl. And it's always technically played on the first Sunday of February, so I guess that sort of remains part of the kind of tradition of this particular game. And the thing is it's a very big cultural phenomenon, this particular event. I mean, there is so much commercialism surrounding this sport, and so much money that has been made by having football around. It's really quite fascinating. I think it is a little bit overblown. I honestly think that a lot of the sports, at least within the United States, are a little bit over-exaggerated and overemphasized. But they do bring in a lot of money. Because there is a lot of desire into putting forth a certain amount of value to this sport, and in doing so to the Super Bowl. And there's a lot of gambling also as well that's involved with sports, in particular on the day of the Super Bowl, because it is one of the big sporting events of the year, probably the biggest, at least within the United States. And although I think its influence has obviously grown throughout the years, I'd say that at least nowadays, I think people are not really as, I think, invested um, as I think the older generation is. Um, Obviously, there's younger kids who do enjoy these kinds of activities of, throwing the football and uh, watching the games or whatnot. But I think the level of uh, interest may or may not diminish, sort of just depending, because it's kind of just been around for so long. And it's kind of one of those things where it's just not something that I am as into as maybe other people are. I mean, it's entertaining to watch if the sport, or if the game is actually entertaining. In other words, if the score is close and if the teams are actually doing pretty well. Um, but the thing is that there's, I think, too much of a uh, I think there's a sense of trying to kind of almost put football on this kind of pedestal, and I sort of don't think it's any better or any worse than any other kind of sport. It's definitely more aggressive, and I think a lot of what football started as was sort of a spin-off of kind of rugby, uh, and eventually we invented football, and hence we have the Super Bowl, and I think, it's a real chance to, I think, have a lot of um, money go into it, and it's a very huge industry, and something that, again, its influence, I think, will be still fairly huge. As to how big, though, I think still remains to be seen. I mean, it's made it to 50 years, so it might still hold off fairly well. But again, depending on people's interests and people's uh, perspectives onto things, you never know if these sports are going to kind of uh, make it to 100 or not. It would be interesting to see if that be possible, but I think at the end of the day, the important thing is that it's just one of those things where, it's kind of, you treat it as sort of a little bit of like a mini holiday. It's like a little celebration. People will, go and to other people's houses and, sort of uh, have drinks and have snacks and whatnot, and, they'll just watch the Super Bowl. And I'm actually happy, though, too, that for the halftime they actually got Coldplay to play, as opposed to like one of these big time notch uh, pop stars like Beyonce or Taylor Swift or something like that. I'm really glad that they chose to kind of, give voice to at least a band, and not just a figurehead. I think that was a really good choice to do, or at least to make. But as far as everything else is concerned, everything is there's a huge, I think, amount of desperation to try to get oneself in the door with the Super Bowl, especially when it comes to commercials, and obviously too, again, a lot of people gamble on who is going to win and by how much and who's going to lose and all of this stuff. And I think, at the end of the day, it's really one of those things where it's more about the money behind it than really the essence of the sport, almost. Um, and I think that's really what, again, I think is kind of lacking from this whole event, because I think a lot of people like to uh, hedge and sort of have a certain amount of consumption to it, but then at the same time, the essence of the sport itself, even too, is kind of, I think, a little bit diminished. And again, there's obviously good conspiracies out there as to whether or not the game is actually rigged, and if so and so is actually going to win, or it's already kind of predetermined or not. There's a lot of closed door, behind the scenes stuff that people probably don't really know about. that the NFL would probably know about. So again, it sort of leaves a lot of things open to speculation, but I think, you know, it's kind of good that we still have it. I think it's great, but at the same time, I think there's still a lot of parts to it that I find to be a little bit too overemphasized. And again, I think this comes from a lot of other things too, like various other holidays, like Valentine's Day or even Christmas. You know, there's just a huge amount put onto it, and I think a lot of it is based upon getting people to buy into it. In other words, people to bring forth their money, and I think that's really the whole idea behind a lot of these things, is to generate some kind of wealth. Um, but I think that's really all I can say, though. I'd be more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say in regards to the sport. Be more than happy to hear who you're rooting for. Um, I mean, I think I would like Denver, at least within this particular game, to win, only because it's going to be, I think, Peyton Manning's last um, run. So I think it would be nice if he could pull something off. And I always like kind of like rooting for the underdog. Uh, but I don't know if it'll be possible because the Panthers have been so uh, overly impressive that it may be uh, difficult for, I think, Denver to really pull off a win. But I mean, who knows? It's funny because my emotions say one thing and then my logic says another. So, uh, yeah, I think that's really all I can say, though. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.